Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Emergency Action Planning broadcast. That's right. Today we have the wonderful Miss Michelle Jewsbury speaking with us. Now, Michelle, she is a powerhouse advocate for those who have experienced pain and trauma. As the CEO and founder of Unsilenced Voices, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering survivors of domestic violence and abuse. Michelle has become a leading voice in the fight against these insidious crimes. So, Michelle, I'm curious, and I always ask this question, so I'm sure you're used to it. What got you started here? What brought you down this path of your life? How did you get there?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to everybody who is watching and listening. I am super excited to share my story on this platform and to encourage people. So, a bit about me. I grew up in a small town in North Idaho, two amazing parents, moved around my whole life. My daddy was military. When I was about 19 years old, I decided I wanted something even more in my life, and that something even more was to move to Hollywood, California, and be a movie star. So I packed my car and drove my happy little butt down to Hollywood, California, and things were going well. I was starring in independent plays, I was doing commercials. If you've ever heard of Papa Murphy's, I thought that that was my stardom. I was able to do that commercial with Papa Murphy's Pizza, and you can see me for about 2 seconds, which is really great. But I really love theater. I love acting, and things were going well. I was progressing. And then I ended up meeting somebody back in 2011 who swept me off my feet. This blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who I thought was my Prince Charming, who I thought I was going to be with for the rest of my life. And shortly into that relationship was the first sign of physical violence. And he had pushed me so hard against a wall that my head went through it. And I ended up staying with my abuser for 4 years. And we don't need to get into the nitty gritty details of what I experienced, but I went through all the spectrums of domestic violence, including emotional, sexual, physical, financial abuse, and psychological manipulation. And when I escaped that relationship, I knew that my story was too big, that I needed to get it out of me. And I ended up writing and performing a 65-minute solo play about my experience back in 2016, calling that But I Love Him. And I ended up, after I ended up performing that, people started coming up to me and telling me their stories of their father, their mother, their sister, their neighbors, themselves, who has experienced domestic violence. And that's when I knew that my story was extremely powerful and that I needed to do something even more. And that's when God called me to start and develop a nonprofit called Unsilenced Voices. And we previously have done work in Ghana and Sierra Leone and Rwanda, and now our focus is in Sierra Leone and the USA. So we're doing a lot as far as sponsoring survivors, developing curriculums and educational programs, helping sex workers and doing counseling, providing medical assistance. And here in the US, a lot of awareness campaigns, fundraisers, and also we plan to start a day center in the Tampa area, Tampa, Florida, with wraparound services.
Well,
So there's your answer in a very extended length. But there you
okay.
go. That's why I do what I do.
Well, I'm going to dig down into some of that stuff that you talked about because I want to hear more about it. So, it's sad that you went through this situation, but also what's even sadder is you're not alone. This is something that goes around the world. It's just not a United States thing. It's an international product or process of sorts. And so, what is? I'm just trying to figure out what is the impetus. What starts these things going? Why do these things happen? I mean, it's we don't wake up in the morning. I don't think anybody woke up in the morning saying, "I'm either going to be an abuser or I'm going to be abused." But how does this get started? What's going on there?
A lot of this is generational. So typically, this is going to be a really harsh stat, but 40 to 60% of children who experience domestic violence in their home will either turn out to be an abuser or the abused. 40
Okay.
to 60%. So it's a huge percentage. 40 is what I received from a place in Dallas when we worked over there, and 60 to 70% was Vegas and Los Angeles area. So there's a big spectrum there. However, what we do know for sure is that if you experience violence, then you are either prone to violence as being abused or as being the abuser.
Okay.
And really unfortunate is you are right. People that they don't wake up and say, I'm going to hit my wife, or I'm going to spit on my fiance, or I'm going to kick my husband. They don't think that. However, it's a lot of mental health. It's a lot of being able to control your emotions. And oftentimes when we are triggered because of things that have happened to us in our past. I call that adverse childhood experiences. When we're triggered and brought back to situations that are painful or uncomfortable, then we tend to lash out, and we lash out to the people that are closest to us, which are technically our spouses.
Right.
And this is not just women that are the abused, although the number is a lot higher, but I have often met men who have been in domestic violence relationships with their wives, and their wives throw plants and spit on them and kick them and scratch them and say horrible things to them because your speech actually has longer lasting implications than that of even physical violence.
That's true. A lot of people don't know that our words are a weapon if we don't use them right. It can be very, very sharp and hurtful. So one of the interesting things, I know, April is a Child Awareness Month, and it's promoting, domestic abuse for children. And you mentioned that majority of the people who grow up this way grew up this way. So I know, well, I don't know. Tell me exactly what it is you do with the people. I mean, do you deal with mothers, fathers, adults, or do you deal with children, or do you have a niche there that you're working with?
Yeah, so we have two different niches. I'm going to backtrack real fast. It's not all of the people, right? So I didn't experience abuse growing up. So when I was encountering my abusive situation, I didn't know what I was facing, which caused me to stay because of the cycle, the apology stage. Now, with dealing with children and with dealing with adults and men and women, it's a very touchy situation. So in America, we primarily deal with adults. Now, our Tampa center that we're planning to open, we also want to provide a housing component there. Okay. And we are going to need to accept children. Now, Tampa, if you are not familiar with Hillsborough County, is one of the top counties in America for human trafficking.
Right. I know that. Yeah, I used to live in Clearwater.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. But California, Texas, and Florida are the largest human trafficking statistics in the United States. And unfortunately, 100% of human trafficking victims and survivors experience domestic violence. Right. So you deal with a lot of challenges in regards to integration back into society. So right now in the US, we have a coaching curriculum, and this curriculum teaches overcoming trauma and pain, also teaches financial literacy through a Christian perspective. So spirituality is very important. We're definitely not Bible thumpers, but we definitely talk about God and Jesus. Now, in Sierra Leone, we primarily deal with girls age ranged of 12 all the way up to 38 years old. So unfortunately, we have a couple of young girls who have been trafficked in the country, 12, 13, 14 years old, and in sex work at that age. So we work a lot with the brothels. We work a lot with the schools. We've got a sponsor a survivor program to where you can actually sponsor a survivor for $3.33 a day. And that pays for vocational training, materials, that pays for medical counseling, and a monthly stipend. So we need more information and more sponsors, and we need more collaborations to happen. But in order to do that, of course, we need more funding.
And I know it's unfortunate that, money does rule, but let's take the money out of it for a moment here. Let's find a way that we can probably engage the people who need the help the most. And it's sad to say, on a male perspective here, we're grown up and taught to be aggressive. We're taught to be violent at times. I have a past history of the military. I was trained how to do things that most people don't do. And if people fall into that violence mode or using violence as a way to exert their authority over people, do they recognize it, or is it just something that's normal, or do they embrace it and go for it? I mean, how does that usually work?
Oftentimes, narcissistic abusers don't
Okay.
see what they're doing is wrong, right? So there has to be a repercussion served for their actions in order for them to start understanding what it is that they're doing.
Right.
Now, as far as an abuser, you're talking nature nurture controversy. You are talking where we grew up, our socioeconomic backgrounds. Sometimes people are aware that what they're doing is wrong. However, in cultural situations as well, when you are brought up and you are taught to use force and anger to subdue your spouse or to abuse your children, that is a cultural understanding, and you don't know what you don't know.
True.
So it's the education component, right? Bringing in that education and teaching people that no, the man and the wife both have the same morals and respect and humanity, and you need not use abuse and force. Now in the United States, we are taught that you're not supposed to do that, right? However, there's still cultural boundaries that happen all over, and oftentimes when primarily men grow up in abusive situations, they tend to be more aggressive and more abusive. So then
Just
they
not
don't
something
know.
else.
They
Yeah.
grew up that way. They don't know that what they're doing is wrong.
Okay, so are there resources, like we know that the United States is intended to become inclusive multiculturally in a lot of ways. And we know there are certain ethnic groups in the country that fall right into that male dominated violence thing based on the culture they came from and decided to bring it here. That's happening. And we see it all around us in a lot of different places. So one thing I do know and I do understand is that sometimes the woman is usually the subject of the violence, and any attempt that they make to try to fix something will sometimes bring more violence to them. Is that correct? Or is there ever a point where the man says, duh, maybe you're right and I should do something? How do we make that happen? That's what I would like to
Well,
say.
I mean that's the educational component. But however, when you try to escape an abusive situation, that is when your stats, your statistics go even higher as far as the possibility of death.
Okay.
So when you try to leave, when you escape that situation, you are more prone to even more violence from your abuser. My teaching, my advice to you who are listening, if you are in an abusive situation and you are seeking to get out and seeking to get help, make plans. Don't just react to certain situations happening around you. Actually be strategic and make a plan on how do I escape? How am I going to leave? Make calls to shelters, make calls to other domestic violence organizations as to where you can get that help. Understand that when you leave, he or she will try to control your finances, take your children, say that they're going to use the government and the judicial system against you. However, know that you have rights as being a victim of domestic violence and abuse, any type of abuse. This could be sexual abuse, this could be trafficking issues, this could be domestic violence issues, but you do have rights. So when you escape, make sure to plan that out. I remember in my specific situation, I know I'll be pretty quick here, Daniel. I started to hide away money. I wasn't allowed to have a job. However, I picked up after him after an evening or in the morning, and oftentimes he had cash in his pockets. So I would stow away some money. So I had that money, and I actually paid my car payments twice per month. He didn't catch on to it for that last year, which was thank God, right? But I paid those car payments. So when I escaped, I had a year of payments already covered. So then I could get back on my feet I could get a job and I could work my way into integration back into the workforce and society.
Okay, so there are ways to get out of it. So tell me, depending on the demographic, the major community or minor community, or the population base, they usually will have some sort of domestic abuse resource. Are there any that don't?
Not in the US. I believe that every state has a domestic violence resource. Now, here's the problem. A lot of the resources that are needed are housing resources.
Right,
And housing is a huge issue when it comes to women and men escaping. I know in Hillsborough County, there used to be a boys program.
right.
However, the housing is no longer there. So being a male victim is even more difficult and challenging to get the help. And as far as being a female victim, finding a place that actually will accept you is very challenging because they're full. We need more resources. We need more organizations to step up and provide housing options, provide counseling options that are free of charge for a lot of these survivors that are escaping. So in the US, we do see that there are resources available in pretty much every state. When you start looking overseas, that's when your resources lack even more.
Okay. So based on what you just told me, though, excuse me, the resources are there, but the United States basically because of the housing crisis we're having in general, the housing for these needy people is almost non-existent. So how can we get it? So say if there's a man or a woman out there listening to this and they just need to do something because they're so crushed by what's happening. How do we keep them from getting so despondent because they're thinking, well, there are no resources. I have no help. How can we actually really help them as much as we possibly can?
Yeah, a lot of that is education, right? So, Unsilenced Voices, our curriculum will help teach you how to overcome some of the pain and trauma that you've gone through. But the really big key component that we've added was the financial literacy, because you really have to understand how to make money and how to keep your money
Right.
and use that money for housing, childcare, food, and just being smarter with the money that you do have. You can find information on unsilencedvoices.org about that. You can also email me, Michelle at unsilencedvoices.org. Last year, we were able to gift 26 US survivors $33,000 that they were able to use for relocation, transportation, housing care, or childcare needs. We are now mandating going through the curriculum first before we can offer any type of subsidies and grants, because you have to teach people how to fish. You just can't give them fish.
Right.
Now, I know that there's a lot of other organizations that provide free training, free resources where you can come in and talk to a case manager about not only housing, but getting a job, filling out a resume, finding childcare, et cetera, et cetera. So reach out to your closest organization and find out some of the resources that they have to offer.
Okay, so one thing that's popping up in my brain because I'm the risk management guy here is you mentioned that these people who are needing these resources need to reach out and find them. But if we have a overbearing helicopter abuser who's looking at everything we're doing, might be looking at our phone, could be looking at our history on our laptop, how can we do this without getting ourselves in more trouble?
Delete the history for sure. A lot of nonprofit organizations that deal with domestic violence and trauma, when you go to their websites, there's an escape button that leads you right back to Google. So if somebody is overshadowing you, you literally hit escape and it looks like you're Googling something. You can also say, you're having lunch with a friend, that you are having a play date with the kids, something along those lines to where you can actually physically get to that location. Use a burner phone if you need to call and seek and ask for help. Reach out to the people that are closest to you. I remember when I had friends that were telling me, you're in a horrible situation. I wasn't ready to see that yet. Well, when I finally was able to see that, a lot of those friends have closed their doors. So
Right.
if you are a friend and you know of somebody who's experiencing domestic violence, don't close the doors, because sometimes it does take 6, 7, 8 different times of leaving and going back, for them to finally leave that situation. And if you're a victim, find somebody that you trust, go to churches, find somebody that you might be able to stay with for a little bit where he does not know where you are. So like I said, be very strategic in this. Understand if he is super overbearing or if she is super overbearing. You might have to do some white lies in order to make sure to get the resources that you need.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring that up real quick because I know about it. If you're looking at staying in the community or staying elsewhere where you're not safe, make sure your phone doesn't have a tracker on it. Because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of companies, and I know, have all my kids' phones and I can track every one of them. Not
Yep.
because I want to, but because they're always losing the darn thing. So I'm just throwing that out there because it should be.
My
Um,
abuser actually tracked my phone one time. I left the house. I didn't know that he had find your phone on his phone, find my phone on his phone, and he tracked me driving up the 101 freeway in California.
yeah. Okay, so just to throw that out there for people who might not be aware of it. Okay, so there's a couple other ideas and concepts here. You mentioned that people are closing the door. Now, what's this? It's like when somebody's offering you assistance and help over and over and over, and you're not taking it, finally they're going to stop offering? Or is there something else going
They
on?
get annoyed. It's the same thing dealing with a drug addict, for example, right? You tell this addict, stop doing drugs, stop doing drugs. Here's some resources. Here's how we can help you. And they continue to do the same thing over and over again. You, as somebody who's trying to support them, gets annoyed and upset and disheartened and aggravated.
Right,
And finally you say, enough is enough. Oftentimes that happens as well in these types of situations, dealing with abusive partners, trying to help people get out of those situations, and then they go back. If you are in that realm, right, and if you've tried to help over and over again, I will tell you, one day your help will matter. So keep your doors open.
okay, so even if they're not walking through the door today, that doesn't mean they won't tomorrow, right?
You're planting the seed,
That's
right? It
right.
says in the Bible even that you plant seeds where you can, and you never know where they're going to sprout.
Right. Okay. So the skills that the individuals can learn by going to your website, and we're going to have that link down here somewhere at the bottom of below the video here for everybody to go to that might need it. So you have free educational resources and stuff in there. So can you talk me through what those resources are? What is the educational output that this person would be receiving?
Yeah, so it's an eight module system, and it's really crafted to help you and teach you how to obtain a job, find your passion in life and your vision, really kind of break down some of the barriers that you have where he or she has told you that you're not good enough, help to increase your self-confidence. This course will also help you to seek the resources that you need and also be able to use your story. So I deal a lot with people who have escaped already
Right.
and they are stuck in the trauma of their situation. So we have our curriculum with Unsilenced Voices, and then I personally do a lot of business and personal development coaching. And all of that is using your story to then create something even more. So, launching and building and growing a nonprofit organization, launching a business. People need to hear what you've gone through. And in order to stop this epidemic, we have to speak with our voices what we've went through, what has happened in our lives to change what is going on in society. Because people don't know what they don't know. I said this earlier, and oftentimes people are unaware that there are people going through the same types of situations,
Right.
and they don't have to be trapped, and they don't have to allow those circumstances to define who they are.
Well, you mentioned something just a moment ago which caught my interest. You know, the person might be physically out of that situation, but mentally they're still in it. So,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, it sounds like what you're trying to help them with is some life skills in general and some, oh, I'm trying to find the right words, some ways to overcome what it is that they've been living through so they can be the real, true person they're meant to be.
Yeah, it is life skills training for sure. We also do have a support group once a month. It meets the first Wednesday, I believe, of the month, and it's via Zoom. So I believe that's at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time.
Right. Okay, so you mentioned earlier, though, one of the big problems with the abuser is probably a narcissistic attitude of some sort. So they don't think like they're doing anything wrong. This is just the way it's supposed to be, right? Well, what about the few? And I'm sure there probably has to be a few that are not that far gone yet. What
Yeah.
resources for them can, if that's a good situation, what kind of resources can those people get to curb their appetite for being the boss and being the violent person?
Yeah. So in my book, But I Love Him, which I published back in 2019, I dove deep and did a lot of research as to what services are provided to abusers.
Right.
And of them. There is a process called HEALS, HEALS, that helps you to really kind of break down why you are lashing out. I don't remember who runs that, but if you Google HEALS, you might be able to find some information online. What I know, though, is that hurt people hurt people.
True.
So a lot of the reason why domestic violence happens is because the abuser is triggered in some way or fashion, and it's all based upon what they've experienced in their past as well. So it's helping them to recover what they've done or what has happened to them, and then from there, work through therapy and counseling services, talk, right? Speech, talking about what's happened. And if you're not familiar with traditional modalities like therapy and counseling, you can do non-traditional as well, which is more like movement or plays. You can write poems. You can do dance therapy. There's all kinds of different ways to be able to express yourself, express your anger, express your feelings of hurt or hatred, rather than using your fists or your words to hurt other people.
Okay, so when we're taking that same theme there, let's say there's the abuser, there's the abused. Is there ever a point where sometime or a point that the abused individual starts becoming an abuser?
I'm sure, yes. There's no statistics out there for that, but oftentimes the victim will fight back,
Right.
right? And in my case, I started to fight back, and then I learned very quickly that when I fought back, then the abuse was even worse. So yeah, the pain and the turmoil of going through an abusive situation, you may still have some ghosts in the closet per se, or
Right.
some baggage, right? So when you escape that situation, you think, I'm fine, I'm all good. Let me dive into this next relationship. Oftentimes you use negative language, you use slapping or hitting in response to even grown up adult conversations because you're triggered based on your past. This is why I encourage victims and abusers both separately to go to counseling, to go to therapy, because when you get into another relationship, you don't want to take what you've learned from your past and bring it to the present.
True. Okay, well, that's a very good point there. Okay, so you mentioned that you have a little freebie. It's called the 5 steps to overcome obstacles. Why don't you walk me through those 5 steps? What are they?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a free gift. So if you're listening from the United States, all you have to do is text UNITE, UNITE, to 26786. Again, text UNITE to 26786. And the 5 steps, the first is recognize, the second is thoughts, third is feelings, fourth is words, and fifth is action. So it talks a lot about recognizing what you've gone through, the thoughts that you have and how to control your thoughts, writing therapy, listening to great podcasts and books, diving into mentorship, your feelings, being able to express yourself and what your ACE score is, which is adverse childhood experiences, using positive power words for not only yourself, but for the people around you, because like you and I have discussed, your tongue is a weapon. So being able to use positive language instead of derogatory or negative language to empower instead of taking away somebody's power. And then of course those action steps that are needed. So that action could be, going on hikes, taking more time for self-care, understanding that you are the most important person in your life. And it's all about how you treat you. And you have to take care of you before you can take care of the world.
That's quite true. And by the way, I'm also going to, you gave me a link at mobilepages.co. And
Yep.
I'm going to
Yes.
put that down here. So I'll give the information. They can either text 26,786, unite to 26,87,6, 26,78,6,
Yeah.
or they can go to the link I'm going to put down here somewhere below this video here. So is there
Perfect.
anything we haven't covered? Is there anything else that you'd like to mention that I know you have an upcoming event for Mother's Day, right? What tell us about that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of upcoming events. For Mother's Day, we've got a Mother's Day campaign with Park Lane Jewelry that is actually starting in 2 days. So I don't know when the podcast is launching, but it'll be launching on the 16th of April. And for 2 weeks, Park Lane Jewelry will do a 50-50 split with Unsilenced Voices, which is a really great campaign. Park Lane Jewelry has beautiful jewelry pieces. So please, visit the website and go on and sign up for the emails. And I'll go ahead and send emails in regards to that. You can find more information, I'm sure, at Park Lane Jewelry and also Unsilenced Voices. But that's an online campaign. We've got an in-person event called Wine and Dine for a Cause. That is in Tampa, Florida. The ticket's only $39, and that includes lunch and a couple glasses of wine. So it's very inexpensive. And this is, again, May 20th in Tampa, Florida at Cooper's Hawk Winery. Visit unsilencedvoices.org for more info. And we are also right now in the process of planning a golf fundraiser called Drive Out Domestic Violence that will be in Las Vegas. We are looking for 18 teams of 4, so 72 players. There are sponsorship opportunities available. Just go to driveoutdomesticviolence.com. Again, driveoutdomesticviolence.com.
All right. So that sounds good. I'm going to make sure all this information is down here, and hopefully I'll get this up within the next 48 hours. But one thing that is still on my brain that you mentioned very early, and it's all about the money, honey. I mean, unfortunately it is. So how can we get you some sponsors? What can we do to help you get
that
some
would be
sponsors?
really great. So we've got sponsorship opportunities available, $15,000 all the way down to $1,000 for the golf sponsorship. We are looking for a corporate sponsor as well, somebody to come on our team to help with our growth, but for us to be able to come in and you can say as a corporation that you support a nonprofit. You are more trustworthy, more reliable. People are attracted to you even more when you have a philanthropic cause. So we can be that philanthropic cause. You would, of course, be in all of our literature, press releases, on our social media. So it's a good win-win there. So you would attract even more clients, and then we would also be able to obtain more donations from yourself, and then, of course, from regular donors that come in and just want to donate.
Okay, so if we were going to go into your website, and your website is again?
Unsilencedvoices.org.
And we would be able to find some information in there on how to be a sponsor?
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, that's good, because those people who want to be your sponsor need to know that information so we can get it to them. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, this about wraps up our time here. So anything else you want to cover? Anything we haven't talked about? Is there anything just floating at the top that needs to come out?
Well, I always end podcasts with one thing, and this is for encouragement to the viewers and listeners out there. There's a movie called Finding Nemo. And in that movie, Dory sings one thing over and over again: just keep swimming. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. So if you are listening, and if you are involved in a traumatic situation, or you've gone through a past situation that's affecting you, just keep swimming. Take resources, utilize the people around you, but just keep going.
All right, that sounds great. Okay, so everybody who's listening, help us out. Help this young lady, help Michelle out, because she's trying to help other people. Okay, and give yourself a pat on the back for doing it. That's right. So, Michelle, I thank you for your time, your energy, and I so promote what you're doing. And I know that because of this conversation here, we're going to find some other people who are going to jump right on the bandwagon and help you out. So in the meantime, this is Daniel with Emergency Action Planning and Michelle Jewsbury with the Unsilenced Voice. And until next time, I want all of you to stay informed and stay safe.